September 11, 2001. On this infamous day, 19 activists associated with Al-Qaeda, an Islamic extremist group, seized control of 4 airliners and carried out suicide attacks against the United States. The World Trade Center in New York City was hit by 2 planes, and the Pentagon was hit by another plane just outside Washington, D.C. The 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers took control of the plane to thwart another targeted attack on the U.S. The attacks resulted in extensive death and destruction. Over 3,000 people were killed during the attacks in New York City and Washington, D.C., including more than 400 police officers and firefighters, according to the History.com staff. The incident triggered the major U.S. initiatives to combat terrorism and defined the presidency of George W. Bush. After these terrorist attacks, the Bush administration declared that established legal protections would not be afforded to individuals it deemed to have engaged in terrorist activity. The Bush administration soon announced its policy for handling captured individuals judged to be engaged in or in support of hostile military actions against the U.S. military forces. Prisoners were sent to detention facilities such as the one in Guantanamo Bay. According to the American Democracy by Thomas E. Patterson, the Supreme Court issued a sharp rebuke of the Bush administration's detention policies. The court held that the detainees were protected both by the U.S. Uniform Code of Military Justice and by the Geneva Conventions. At issue was the Bush administration's use of secret military tribunals to try detainees. These terrorist detainees should not receive the benefits of an American court system. America is at war with terrorism. According to the American Democracy by Patterson, in time of war, the courts have upheld government policies that would not be permitted in peacetime. After the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, for example, President D. Roosevelt ordered the forced relocation of tens of thousands of Japanese Americans living on the West Coast to detention camps in Arizona, Utah, and other inland locations. Congress endorsed the policy and the Supreme Court upheld it in Korematsu versus United States. Another Supreme Court ruling during World War II denied a U.S. citizen arrested as a Nazi collaborator a court trial after the government decided to try him before a military trial. According to Webster Dictionary, enemy combatant is a term referring to a person who either lawfully or unlawfully directly engages in hostilities for an enemy state or non-state actor in an armed conflict. Classifying and regarding these detainees as enemy combatants, lawful or unlawful, or prisoners of war is crucial to their protection under the Geneva Convention. War against terrorism has deemed these detainees enemy combatants. Terrorists detained at Guantanamo Bay should not be tried in the American court system. The detainees are not U.S. citizens and should not receive the benefits under the Constitution and Bill of Rights of being one. If trial is necessary, a military tribunal would suffice for the enemy combatant. A trial on American soil would give protection to these terrorists. Certain evidence cannot be used in the American court system. Federal court trials give terrorists certain rights, which make some of the evidence against them inadmissible. Unacceptable evidence against terrorists can result in his or her release. A 2010 CNN survey found that more than 2/5 of Americans would deny information about constitutional rights to individuals apprehended on suspension of terrorism. While some may argue that detainees in Guantanamo Bay have the right to be tried in the American court system, you can clearly see, with logical reasoning, that the war on terrorism deems the detainees as enemy combatants. And for the safety of the American people, detainees at Guantanamo Bay should be tried outside of the American court system.